Hey guys, welcome back or to the Wild Courage podcast. Today I find myself in Cowtown, Elko, Nevada, sitting down with my brother on our 1 year anniversary. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time out of our napping day to do this.
Thanks for having me. It's been a quick year, huh?
I know it flew by. So the National Cowboys Poetry Gathering has been going on. I don't even know how many years in Elko,
Forever.
for a long
A
time.
lot.
And our friend Justin Riker and Nicole Grady
Yes.
do this thing. This is the 10th anniversary this year of the Outside Circle show, which is kind of geared around working cowboys, singer-songwriters, because the Cowboy Poetry Gathering's been so commercialized, right? It started out with like working cowboys singing the songs that they wrote when they're on the wagon or out on the desert, right, and writing poetry, and it got commercialized. And so that's kind of what brought us together is Justin invited you and I to be on a panel last year at Stockman's Casino, the historic Stockman's Casino, to talk about emotional, mental health, suicide, and addiction
Within the cowboy
community. And it was so honoring to be invited into that space. And you and I were on a panel of probably 8 or so other folks, and like we kind of like
We hit it off immediately.
super fast.
Yeah, we were both like we knew. I think our attentions were aligned, and our message was aligned, and our hope was aligned in what we wanted to do, and it's. I think you find that in situations like this where none of us are being paid to be here. None of us are in suites. I mean, let's just be honest. You and I are sharing a room, and we got our buddy on a bedroll.
Yeah.
And,
Cowboy style.
We're doing it cowboy style here, and it's an honor to be on a panel like that where people are just here to help. No one's getting anything out of it. None of us are getting a dime. It's actually costing us money.
Yeah, time away from
and time away from our family and time away from work and what have you. And it's when you get like-minded individuals like that who are all aligned in the intention of just saying, hey, we got to come together and help this community, like by hook or crook, no matter how we're doing it. It kind of, you can't help but to get a little magic in there to where, relationships blossom and
well, I love the tension of it all, right? Like we're here on a mission that would 20 years ago you and I would have been here on a completely different mission, right? Like, and now to get to be here, and what I mean by the tension of it is like there's a handful of us that are kind of like easing in this community about our message, and in the midst of it, it's like we're staying out all night with people getting hammered and like figuring it out. We're like a block away right now from the whorehouse Mona's, that's like all these famous places, right? Like that Ian Tyson sang about and poetry's been written about for 100 years. Like it's so.
We're a block away from the Desert Rose where Kenny Fiedler just wrote a song about, so it's
we're right here in the middle.
We're in
of
it, and it's Cowtown too. So it's I couldn't think of a more appropriate place for this all to be going on. Just kind of the whole thing of it, no matter what your feelings about the poetry gathering are, or they aren't, or even the Outside Circle show. No matter what your feelings about any of it, there's some history here, some thick, rich history, and I think it's the perfect spot for us to be doing this, because last year the panel that we did, no one ever tried anything like that in the cowboy community before. I told Justin and Nicole, I'm like, I'll be surprised if there's 2 people there.
I know, I was too.
And we had a good turnout. It was well received. It was we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants, but it worked.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing is like I invited you to come on the podcast a year ago, and we just couldn't get it put together. And how fitting that it's here in the motel where in a couple hours we're going to be doing this panel again.
Yeah.
You and I with some other folks right outside the door of our motel room. Like,
yeah. Kind of scene of the crime.
Yeah, so it's perfect timing that I think that we're sitting down here, and I've kind of held off from getting to know your story. Like, I love your heart and getting to know you, because you and I have really connected over the last year and went through some stuff together,
Yes,
and
sir.
like, you know, so I know your heart, but I again intentionally have kind of like held you at bay of knowing your story.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to do it in this space. So this is the perfect, I think, time for us to jump in.
You know, timing is everything, and everything happens kind of when it's supposed to. Doesn't necessarily happen the way we want it to or when we want it to, but everything happens the way it's supposed to. And I think if we would have done it last year, it really would have been two strangers sitting down. But in that year now, it's two brothers sitting down, and two like brothers in arms, so to speak, sitting down. So it adds a little more depth and weight to the conversation, which I think is what your podcast is all about, and what people want to hear. They want to hear that depth and weight. You know, it's what we identify with, and we identify with that message of like, oh, this is the real deal. You know, from real guys, where, especially in our community, in the cowboy community, that whole like real guy thing, it kind of holds us back from a lot, but at the same time, it helps us identify with like, oh yeah, he's one of us. He's a hand or whatever, you know. And it opens people up to the message who would otherwise maybe not hear it as clear, or hear it with an open mind and an open perspective.
I think I always come back to the same kind of phrasing for it. It's like, these stories are just giving guys permission to go on their own journey of like, oh man, I thought I was alone in this, and here's some dudes talking about something that I didn't know anybody else experienced. I thought I was alone, and then it just really gives guys permission to like, oh, why am I'm like that too, or I struggle with the same thing, and that's what's beautiful about it, and that's why I'm grateful for getting to sit down with you today and get to know how did you get here? Because you weren't, the cowboy community wasn't a likely journey for you.
No, not at all. It's strange. My journey is a little strange because I honestly spent the better part of my life, and still at this point in my life at 53, you know, I've still have spent the majority of my life kind of chasing the approval of a ghost, my father. You know, my father was one of those guys. You know, he was rough and tumble, and you know, he could always get the girl, and he could do anything. He could surf. He was a gymnast. He was a biker. He was a hand. He rode down with the vaqueros down in Mexico and in New Mexico for a while. So he was just one of those guys, kind of a
Superman,
like a journeyman in the true sense. You know, just kind of pack up his bags and, you know, whatever, throw what he had in his saddlebags and just kind of end up where he ended up and made it work. And you know, he passed away when I was still a baby, and I grew up hearing all these stories of him.
Where did you grow up?
I was born in California, and then I was raised partly in the Sangre de Cristos in New Mexico, up in the mountains and around New Mexico, Taos and Tucumcari and that, and then back to California. And I would go between Southern Oregon and California, between my aunt's house in Southern Oregon and California. And then in my kind of late teen years, I started touring with bands.
Wait, how old were you when your father passed away?
It was 11 days after my first birthday, so I don't have any recollection of my father. I have two photographs. I have three photographs of my father. One is him standing with some bald-faced mare and somewhere in New Mexico. The other is him holding me asleep in a chair in front of our adobe in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and another one is him sitting in a tree in the Topanga Canyon, and that's like all
That's it.
that's all I have of my father.
Were your parents married?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's a whole that I don't know. My family is very steeped in secrecy, and we don't talk about this, and we just kind of like we think we kind of have that attitude. I don't have. I haven't spoke to anyone in my family for a very long time. I speak to a couple of my cousins, but I haven't spoke to my mother in almost gosh, it's got to be almost 25 years.
Oh, dang.
And there's no bad feelings on my part. It's just and I feel horrible saying this, and this isn't saying, I'm not trying to be disparaging to her, because there's no resentment or anything. It's just that relationship doesn't really serve a purpose in my life.
Yeah.
And but I've made my amends, and I don't carry a resentment towards her. And my perspective on she did the best she could with what she had to work with, and she didn't have much to work with.
Did you have stepdads in the picture?
A lot of step boyfriends, a lot of quote unquote uncles, and that, like, lots of them. So some better than others, some more violent than others, some more accepting of my brother and I than others. And so my idea of what a relationship looked like was kind of skewed by what I saw in my home life.
Sure.
Because I figured the way these men treated my mom is the way you treat women.
That's what was modeled to you.
Yeah, and it's just like how I saw relationships go. The only thing that I knew was just outright wrong was just like, seeing my mom get the shit beat out of her. Like to this day, like if I don't have the tolerance for it. I've never partook in that in my life, and I just and if I see it, I don't. It kind of brings back that trauma.
Sure.
To where I snap and go into kind of savior mode, which in hindsight, which doesn't really have anything to do with what's going on with these people, probably complete strangers. Yes, there is that part of me that, like, it's just the right thing to do, or is it the right thing to do to mind your own business? I guess it depends on who you ask. But for me, it takes me back to being in that, being a little kid in that place of powerlessness, and being completely powerless against, a grown man. And I'm a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, having to watch this go down. So.
And you just had the one brother?
I just had the one brother, and older brother. We had different fathers, and he was kind of in and out. His father was alive, so sometimes he'd go. He would go live with his father. His father had a ranch up in Watsonville, so I'd go up there sometimes and spend the summer with them, and up in Watsonville, and work the ranch and all that. And and then eventually, about 25 years ago, that's how I know it was the last time I talked to my mom. My brother committed suicide.
Oh.
He was sober for about 8 years, and he relapsed, and his solution, for lack of a better word, was to drink a keg of beer, stand on it, and hang himself in his apartment. So, and that was one of the many big turning points in my life, because my brother was always there for me. He was my older brother, and we were brothers, man. I mean, there's not a brother on earth who took more ass whoopings for his little brother than my brother, because one, I had a big mouth. Two, I was mad at everything.
Sure.
At everything.
And you didn't even know why at the time.
I had no idea why, and I was just mad at everything. And my mouth had this gift for writing checks that my ass couldn't cash.
I do know.
So he
He
got
bailed you out.
oh he bailed me out quite a few times.
How much older?
5 years.
Oh, so he had some muscle to protect you.
Yeah, and he was this big like gentle giant of a man, kind of like this is probably a horrible comparison, but kind of like Mongo from Blazing Saddles, where it's like, Mongo just, punches the mule in the face or whatever, the ox or whatever, but he's this big, strong, just a hand of a man, and but also like the most sensitive guy, and that's what I think was he had all those feelings, those sensitive feelings in this rough and tumble exterior that he didn't know what to do with.
Yeah.
And
that's a lot of hard tension.
Yeah, it eventually led to his death,
Well, and then, I mean, how did you lose your father? Do you know?
I didn't know for a long time, but my father died of a heroin overdose in a motel room in New Mexico.
Oh my gosh.
It was in 1970 early 70s, so it wasn't a thing back then. And for a long time, until I was a teenager, I was just told my dad died. Like there was never any explanation.
He just passed away.
He just passed away. They're just like, it's just, and it's just like one of those things, like, oh, people just pass away. He just passed away. And the why never mattered. And then as I got older into my teen years and I started, getting into that point of life where you start questioning things and start coming up against that, who am I? Which now I look back on, it's like, yeah, no wonder I felt like I didn't belong there.
Sure.
No wonder I had no home, no community, no sense of self, constant imposter syndrome. Like I didn't know anything about myself.
Well, you didn't have a dad to initiate you in any area of life where a young boy needs a dad to say, hey,
yeah,
you got what it takes, or to guide you, or to set boundaries, or discipline. Either way, like you know this, but I mean, the prisons are full of the fatherless.
Full of them.
That's like, I think it's like 80+% of the incarcerated men and juveniles in this country didn't have a dad in the home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and the power of hindsight now, it's like you get why you started making choices and decisions that you did, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, absolutely. And it's
it
funny.
all makes sense.
It's funny because a lot of the men who are in my life that I hold in very high regard and that I have a lot of respect for, like Kenny Fiedler, Kellen Smith, they're all fathers, like those guys are like you guys are like your dads, like your kids mean a lot, I unfortunately, when I had my son very young and I was on tour and I was an absentee father, I tried to be there how I could. He just turned 30, so I was 22 or 23 when I had this kid, and I was still out running wild. And man, to watch him be a father to my grandson and see how he makes sacrifice and lives his every move in his life is to be a better father to his son, to be what he can be. I mean, he's going through the fire academy right now, applying to the fire academies everywhere, and he trying to be a fireman so he can like make a better life for his son. And it's also pretty damn cool to be a fireman. But
is that mixed emotions for you?
Oh, definitely.
Do you? I would imagine, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like I can put myself in your shoes, right? Part of it probably feels like you're super proud
100%.
because he figured some stuff out in the absence of you, because you didn't know how to be a dad because nobody showed you.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like figuring some stuff out without having that model either, which I'm sure makes you super proud of him.
I mean, it makes me the most proud because he struggled for a while. He struggled with addiction and alcoholism and all that. And once he got sober about 10 years ago, that's when our bond started. And I was like, okay, this is my time.
That's very redemptive too.
This is my time to get to be a dad. When he was he begrudgingly had a relationship with me. And he would see it at the time I was still working in treatment and drug and alcohol treatment as a counselor. And he would see all these guys were like, man, your dad's so cool.
He's like, what a piece of shit he is.
Exactly. He was just like, man, fuck that guy, you know? And it would get him more mad that all these guys are saying like, man, your dad has really helped me change my life. He's like, that dude's never done shit for
It's
me.
kind of the preacher's kid syndrome, right? Where all the people in the church are like, your dad's this and that. And the kid's like, my dad's never showed up for me once in my life.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's doing it for everybody else, but
Yeah. But
I feel like we're jumping way far ahead. I want to get back into like, and then we'll catch up to this point if that's cool. Like,
great.
Because music has been such, I mean, one of the biggest things in your life.
Yeah.
That, for good or worse, like made you become who you are today. What I would imagine that's some kind of outlet that you found early on.
well,
Or when did that become a part of your life, or when were you drawn to it?
well, my mom's a jazz singer, you know, and she was a backup singer for a lot of bands. She sang backup for Buddy Miles, and she sang backup for Jimi Hendrix and Pacific Gas and Electric and all this. So
dang.
So my house was always a musical household, and man, I've never talked about this before. And growing up as a kid, you know, I was a chubby kid. I had long hair, and I had this real kind of again, I don't know much about my family history, and I don't know much about my nationality. The little bit that I do know is that we're Basque and part native, either Hopi or Pueblo. I don't really claim it because I don't know if it's true. And for me, the Native community is something that I hold in such high regard, and I have so much reverence and respect for. I don't want to be one of those people who's like, oh yeah, you know, my mom's a Cherokee princess,
Like everybody says all the time.
like everybody says. So, but I had these effeminate features, and everybody thought I was a girl. Everybody there would be like, oh, this is Josh, and he'd be like, that's a weird name for a girl, because I was this little chubby kid with little boobs, you know, little boy boobs, and
long hair,
you know, and just dirtier than hell. I was just, you know, my mom, you know, like I said, she did the best.
Did she travel a lot for singing when you were little, or was that one before you?
That was before me, and that's why I say she did the best she could with what she had, because we always had food and we always had clothes. I mean, we didn't have the nicest. My mom was a waitress at a barbecue place called Love's, so we didn't grow up with much money. We grew up eating a lot of leftover barbecue, you know, and
Hence the chubby little boy girl.
and she, you know, like, I think she had like two specialties that she could cook, which was steak picado and boiled chicken. I can't stand boiled chicken.
I bet.
Even the thought of boiled chicken gets me a little bit
wheezy.
You know, yeah. But we always had music in the house, and she would still sing and do local gigs, and there was band guys all over my house, a lot of drugs in my house, and, you know, Uncle this and Uncle that, and, you know, Buddy Miles used to babysit us, and So there was always people at our house. There was always people getting high, and always drugs. And since I had this thing, and I looked like a little girl, and there was, because my house was so wild, a lot of kids weren't allowed to come to my house. You know,
Yeah, the neighbors knew what was up,
the neighbors knew what was up. Maybe the neighborhood kids didn't know what was up,
but mom and dad did.
but mom and dad definitely knew what was up. And so a lot of kids weren't.
Friends over.
I never had sleepovers or anything at my house. Like I would be able to go to some people's house and spend the night. And I remember, I'll never forget, I had a kid, and I don't know what grade I was in, but I was still in grade school, and they all had dinner at the table, and they all had milk, and like when they all went to go sit at the table to have dinner, I just kind of sat in front of the TV. I didn't know what was going on.
It's foreign.
I was like, what are these people doing?
Weirdos.
This is weird. Like, you have dinner at the dinner table. Like, our dinner table had like laundry on it,
Yeah.
or something. So I did. So needless to say, I didn't have a lot of friends. And then I'll never forget. One day, my brother was living with his grandma at the time, and he would come to our house on the weekends. And my brother came over, and he had some records, and he had some headphones, and he's like, I want you to listen to some of this stuff. And he put the headphones on me, and put a record on the record player. And I remember this music came through, and there was nothing else in the world. Like, the whole world was gone. Those headphones, like the entire world disappeared.
All the noise.
Yeah. And there was this I had this little kind of fort in my bedroom that I shared with my brother. There was a space between the wall and the bed. And I would lay in there, and I put a sheet over it so I could lay in there and no one would see me. And I'd lay in there with the headphones on, and I would just listen to this music.
Do you remember what it was?
I I remember one was the first Black Sabbath album, and we had Tommy by The Who, and I remember that story of Tommy, and figuring out that it was a story. I'd listened to it over and over and over again, and I was like, oh wait, this isn't a bunch of songs. This is a story about a young boy who walks into a bedroom and sees his mom cheating on his dad, who's at war. And they scold him to the point of where he goes blind, deaf, and dumb. And he goes through the world being blind, deaf, and dumb. And his father dies in the war. His mom ends up with this guy she was having a relationship with, and they start trying to cure the boy. They want to know, like, is he's this blind, deaf, and dumb kid, and how are they going to do it? And eventually this kid starts playing pinball, and it becomes his passion. He can feel it, and blah blah blah, and then he gets cured of his blindness or whatever and becomes rich, and then everybody turns on him. And but once I figured it out, it was a story. And once I figured out that, in a sense, I could relate to Tommy, because you weren't allowed to say what was going on in the house. You didn't say nothing. You didn't talk to nobody. You didn't see nothing. You didn't hear nothing. When you go to school, it's like, what are those bruises on you? I fell down on my bike. It doesn't matter who was OD'd in the living room, or how much weed you found in your mom's closet, or what are these pills for, or none of that. Like, none of it left the house. It all stayed in there. And so I could identify with Tommy. So he essentially became a friend. And I started making friends with these other albums that I would listen to. So I would sit in my house and just listen to music the whole time. And it was, that's kind of how I learned about emotions. I was like, oh man, this song, like, makes me sad. I remember my mom had a bunch of records too. And I found this 45 by a woman named Dorothy Moore, a song called Misty Blue. And I remember listening to that, and I was like, this is sadness. and I could listen, and I would start identifying with that. I didn't know how to name the emotion, but I knew what it was. So
Yeah, it was familiar.
yeah, so if I was feeling something, I could put on a song and identify with it in that way. And that's man.
That's exactly why I was and sometimes am drawn to sad music, because it's validating a pain inside of us that we don't know how to verbalize,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah. Benjamin Todd is like that. Like Benjamin Todd is one of those guys for me personally. He says everything
You're feeling.
I'm feeling.
Yeah, it's very validating.
And it's like I listen to it and I'm like, fuck, thanks, brother. I appreciate it, man. It's like, if it's me and you, I never met the guy in my life, I honestly I don't even know if I'd recognize him walking down the street, but goddamn, if he started singing, I'd know exactly who he
Yeah.
is, So
What was your first instrument?
my first instrument was actually, I tried playing horns because there was a horn at my house. So I tried playing the trumpet, and let me tell you, it's not easy.
And it seems like it, with only 3 things you need to figure out.
Yeah, there ain't many moving parts to it. There ain't much to it. But the one thing, this is my brother. So I remember my brother came home, and I had this trumpet, and I was trying to figure out how to play the trumpet. And this, mind you, this was the early 70s, mid 70s. And he's like, "What are you doing, man?" I go, "Man, I'm going to figure out how to play this trumpet. I'm going to start a band." And he looks me dead in the eye. He goes, "What's the matter with you, man? The trumpet's never going to get you laid." And that was it. The trumpet was out. So
Gone.
The trumpet was gone. So I started, and like, this was just weird for me. I tried to play guitar, and the strings were real small, and I kind of had a hard time with it. But I picked up a bass, and the first time I picked it up, I could play it. Like, I could just play it. Don't know how, don't know why.
So you never got lessons or anything?
I've had 4 guitar lessons in my entire life,
But no bass?
and I had those lessons within the last 10 years because I was trying to actually be a better guitar player, and then I figured out, I was like, man, I can actually play a little bit better than this guy that's trying to teach me guitar. But he was teaching me, this note is called to this, and this is
How old were you when you picked up that bass and was like, oh, this is it?
I was man, I don't know. I was a teenager, and I picked up that bass and I started playing, and my whole life flashed before my eyes. Probably like every other kid who picks up a guitar and plays it. Like, I picked it up and I played it. I was ready for a helicopter to pick me up, take me to the limo, and I was going to Madison Square Garden to play a show with my band, and all these girls were gonna throw cocaine in their bras at me.
Yeah.
And my life was just like, I was
Gonna
like,
be better.
it's jet planes from here on out, baby. You know what I mean? But it wasn't quite like that. And the weird thing was I loved music, but I never really truly wanted to be in a band. I'd play in bands here and there, and I'd play, and I played with all these smaller bands, and I'd sit in with bands and I'd do that. But Danzig, when I joined Danzig was actually the first, like, real band that I was in, and it happened all by accident.
Yeah, tell me that. So you're just like, let me paraphrase a little bit. So early teenage years, you pick up a bass, you're like, it's home. This is what I'm meant to do. And it's your outlet, it's your escape, it's something that you can take all the emotions, all the things that you don't know what to do with because you don't even know what they mean or what they are, and you can focus it on this one thing that makes you feel alive when you do it.
Yeah.
And so you're just in your bedroom,
I was in my bedroom
all the time,
just playing
learning.
Records.
So you're just playing along with records.
I was playing along.
No
with
amp
records.
or anything?
No, we couldn't afford to get an amp or anything.
So you're just like feeling it and
yeah,
thumping away on it.
I'm
And then in high school, did you like start? Is that when you started like jumping in on some dudes?
in high school, I started playing in some bands, but I also started touring with some bands. And
So you got good fast.
Well, I started touring as a roadie.
Oh, okay.
And I liked it. I just liked being around
The
music
scene.
and the scene, because it was, because it was familiar.
Well, and
You know,
and those atmospheres create a sense of family that you didn't have really,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I would imagine.
and it was weird. I never wanted to play a band because I always told myself I wasn't good enough. I can't play with this guy because of this, and I can't play with them because of this, and I don't want them to think I suck, and I don't want to have to live up. I'll never be able to live up to anybody's expectation
Sure.
because that's what was just drilled into my head, you know. And but I was like, oh man, I could be a roadie. And once I started being a roadie, in my teenage years, like
Was this during high school?
this
Or?
was during high school. There was a point in my life where it was like, I'm either gonna go to school and just kind of figure life out, and I didn't have any, I didn't have any desire to, I don't know, be a lawyer or an accountant or a plumber or whatever. I was just aimlessly going to school. I had no real direction. But once I started touring and once I started traveling, as corny as it sounds, I think it was the spirit of my father that that sense of being a gypsy, that sense of being a drifter, like my dad, who was in the true sense, and especially in our world, in the cowboy world, he was a drifter,
Yeah.
you know. And once I found that, I was kind of home because for a number of reasons. One, I could go anywhere. Like you have a fresh start every day. If you're in Albuquerque on Monday and then you're in Taos on Tuesday, it's like you have a fresh start every day. You never have to really get to know anyone. No one ever has to get to know you. No one has the time to find you out, and you just have this fresh start
Well,
in your life.
it's a celebrated life of escapism
Exactly.
where it's exalted.
Yeah. And with the band, you have little to no responsibilities. Like, load in is at 4 o'clock, sound check is at 6, doors are at 8, load out is at 10. Like, that's your day.
And in the meantime, as you're being a roadie, you're still playing the bass and like
In the meantime,
honing it in. And
yeah, especially not to jump too far forward, but especially in Danzig. Like, I was roadieing for Danzig. My cousin Joey got the job as the drummer, and he said he's like, you're going to go with me on this tour. You're going to be my roadie. I was like, yeah, sure, let's go. So I went with him, and eventually
and you're like setting up his drum kit and
I was
stuff.
setting up his drum kit, and then eventually I became the bass player's name was Erie at the time, Erie Vaughn. I became his roadie as well, and I don't know, maybe a couple years or something into that, Erie was kind of on his way out in the band and wasn't showing up to sound check and was doing whatever was going on in his life. I don't know, so I don't want to speak to it. He was always a real good guy to me. He wouldn't show up for sound check, so I would start playing for sound check.
Because you knew all the songs.
I knew all the
obviously.
songs, and I knew a bunch of other songs where we could just jam. And at the time, John Christ was the guitar player, and he's a great guitar player, a great guy. And we would jam a bunch of Ted Nugent songs or whatever. He's a huge Ted Nugent fan, so we'd play all these songs, and I would just jam. Long story short, John and Erie ended up leaving the band, and Glenn called me.
Glenn's like the lead singer.
Glenn's the
like,
lead singer, Glenn Danzig. He said, he goes, hey, we're going to try out new guitar players. Will you play bass for these guys while we're trying them out? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. I don't even think I got paid for doing it at the time. Like I was just like, yeah, I'll do it. Great. So we spent the summer trying out a 1,000,003 guitar players, and I was playing for them. And the funny thing is how I got in the band. We finally picked a guitar player, or not we, but Glenn, because he makes all the decisions. He picked a guitar player, and we were going to some party in Hollywood. I can't remember what the party was, or what the year was, but we were going to some party in Hollywood, and we were walking in, and of course that it's Hollywood, so they know who Glenn Danzig is, and they're like, "Oh yeah, who are you with?" He goes, "Me and my band," and he pointed it to us standing behind him, and we were walking in, and I made a joke. I go, "Oh, your band, huh?" He goes, yeah, are you going to be in the band or not? I was like, yeah, sure. And that was it.
That was it?
I was
No
dancing.
way.
Like that was it. Like that was the whole conversation. People get mad when I tell them that because people wanted that position. You know, there was guys lining up around the block. They're like, I'm going to get in this band. And here I was,
Yeah, because
just
at
some
that time, I
schlub.
mean,
Yeah.
that band was,
We were playing stadiums, you
yeah.
know,
So what was your
arenas.
what was your relationship with alcohol and drugs at that point?
Well, I remember the first time, I'll never forget the first time I did drugs. And it was the summer of 70 something. Kiss was playing at the LA Forum, the Kiss Alive 2 tour. And we were going to go, me and my brother, and some friends of ours. We all had tickets. And at this point, in the world, in my world, Kiss was
Oh yeah, they were.
the biggest thing there was. Like everybody had Kiss makeup on, and everybody was somebody from the band or whatever. And Kiss Live 2 was coming, and it was a
Game on.
big deal. And I caught my brother and this guy Tony, our neighbor, smoking weed. I walked into their house, and they were doing bong hits, and I caught them. And my first, because the only defense, I mean, at this point in my life, I wasn't even a teenager yet, and I used my only defense against my brother. I was like, "Ooh, I'm telling mom, and you are not going to see Kiss."
That's a lot of leverage.
Like I had all the leverage, all the cards. I had a whole deck, nothing but aces, and he had nothing. So and he goes, "You're not going to tell mom anything." I go, "Oh, yeah, I am." He goes, "No, you're not, because you're going to smoke pot with us." And I don't remember putting up much of a fight. What I do remember, it was the 70s, so the bong was this high,
Yeah.
and I was this high. So they had to pick me up to do this bong hit. And I took a bong hit, and I hear people, I go to a lot of meetings, and I've been in AA for a long time, and I've heard a lot of people's stories, and I hear a lot of people say, like, man, I took that first drink, I took that first drug, and I was like, whew, I'm home. Like, that's the thing. That is it. That wasn't the case with me. I took this bong hit, and I coughed my brains out, and they put me down, and my first thought was, I want to go swimming. And Tony, in his apartment building, they had a pool. He lived on the basement floor of this apartment. And I walked outside to go jump in the pool, and I was just feeling good, and I was going for this swim, and I stepped on a nail, and it went all the way through my foot. And that was that was God telling me, this is not the path for you, my son. I obviously didn't listen, but that was my first
Your
experience.
introduction.
That was my introduction to drugs and alcohol. And then from then on out, it just didn't stop. I don't think there was ever a break, and it was one of those things where it kind of gradually progressed into harder and harder stuff. And not to go on a whole story about getting doing drugs and getting loaded, because we've all done it, but smoking weed and taking acid, and then started doing mushrooms, and there was all these crazy pills back then, and coke, and then eventually heroin. And that's when heroin was when I was kind of like, I'm good right now. On top of that, it was always drinking. My brother was actually more of a drinker than I was. We used to call him Pat the Boob. And man, he could drink. But his father's Irish, so kind of goes with the territory. But once I found heroin, I was like, this is.
Is this when you were?
I was still a teenager. I was
Oh,
probably
geez.
I was probably 15 or 14 when I started using heroin.
Dang.
And that was it. And I was like, this is where I want to be. Like, this is my life, and I'm fine with it. That sense of I now had purpose. Like, as sad as it is to say, like, my life at that point was so meaningless that heroin gave me purpose. You know,
Because it gave you something to get up for,
gave me something to get up
strive
for, gave me
for,
something to strive
look
for,
forward to.
look for, find.
Yeah,
Like,
but it's a whole game.
it's a
Yeah.
whole game, man. It's a whole game, and it's awful.
So, jumping kind of back into your story, thanks for kind of
Yeah.
giving us the gist of it. So you find yourself in the band. You're the bass player for Danzig,
Yeah. I was a bass player for Danzig.
and drinking heroin. That's just part of the.
No, at that point, I was actually sober. At that point, I had gotten sober, and I was just kind of, I think I had maybe a couple years sober. And, Glenn isn't much of a drinker or a drugger. He'll have a Guinness every now and then. It was funny. One time we got stopped going into Canada because Canada's just like that, crossing the border. And we had these two, Canadian immigration officers trying to tell us there was cocaine on our passports. It's like you pick the sober guy and the one guy who's never done cocaine in his entire life. But some of the guys in the band, went pretty hard at it. My cousin was drinking pretty hard at the time. We had a couple different guitar players who drank pretty hard at the time. But yeah, I was sober.
How old were you when you were in Danzig?
Oh, geez. I was probably in my 30s. I left, I think, I was in my late 20s, early 30s, because I left in 2000. So that's, 24 years ago.
And this is just like crazy because I know you now, so I'm like trying to piece all this together. Like, this is a huge band. You're like seeing the world. Is it sex, drugs, rock and roll without the drugs now, or is what? I mean,
oh yeah,
what's
all.
I
of
can't
it.
even imagine
it's all of it. I mean,
the excess is available.
I mean,
the
put it this way.
availability.
They wanted to kick us off the Ozfest because we were going too hard for them. They were like, "Wow, these guys are really like with the girls and just all of it, like the general chaos and mayhem." They were,
That came with it.
That came with it. We were too much for Ozzy. Ozzy was like, "Yeah, you guys are a little bit too wild."
So you're getting to like tour with all these crazy bands.
Yeah, we toured. We toured with everyone, and we had a bunch of bands. Danzig has this weird urban legend that if you go on tour opening for Danzig, you're gonna be big. And if you look at his track record in that genre of music and the bands that open for him, Soundgarden, Marilyn Manson, Korn, Corrosion of Conformity, White Zombie, like all those bands opened for Danzig. All of them were the opening act,
So you're like, I mean, dude, you're like at festivals with bands that aren't even in that same genre. So you're getting to like
all of it. I mean, we headlined a festival with 300,000 people. Like, it's a lot of people. It's big. I mean, it's super impersonal at that point. It's just a bunch of dots.
Yeah.
Like I would be more nervous. This kind of jumping back to present day. I actually called Justin Reichert and I said, I called him a month or so ago, and I said, "Hey, buddy, I got a couple songs. I turned some Misfits songs and a couple other songs into cowboy versions." And I was like, "Do you think I could get up there and at the Star Hotel and play?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm sure we could figure something out or something," and he was kind of, he's just kind of Justin about it. There's never a definite answer from him. But it gave me too much time to think about it. And I thought about like all those people because
right there.
Yeah, I mean, people don't understand. If you haven't been to a show at the Star Hotel, like last night, Culture Wall was sitting in a stool. There was people about an inch and 3/4 away from him playing. It was nuts. And man, that guy's got a voice. It's wild. But so these big, huge festivals like that. I mean, and on those festivals, we've played with everybody. We played with Plant Page, and we've played with because those huge festivals are such a mix
and diverse,
such a diverse mix of people that that it's wild, you know. I mean, we played a show, and for me it was huge. We played a show with Deep Purple on this big festival, and Ian Gillan was singing, and that was like one of my all-time favorite rock singers. And I remember I was like, you know, he came up to us after the show. I was standing there. He came up. He put his arm around me. He was like, "Man, that was great." And I was like, "Dude, fucking Ian Gillan's touching me right now."
How did I get here?
I was like, Ian Gillan's touching me, you know. And it was.
But you remained sober through that whole part of that.
I remained sober through all of it, and in full disclosure, I remained free of drugs and alcohol, but my behavior and how I carried myself was not that of a sober person.
Well, you hadn't went on the journey yet. You just quit using.
I just quit using.
Yeah, but
yeah,
all the unprocessed pain was still needed an outlet.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think even you see guys get sober and it amplifies the areas in which it's got to come out in. So you're living like even in some areas a more chaotic life than when you were just numbing out.
Yeah. I mean, my life was pure chaos, you know, and it was, you know, I replaced I replaced the drugs and the alcohol with a lot of sex and just general mayhem, you know, and eventually that ran out, and I was faced with it. In hindsight, in retrospect, I was faced with the decision to either like do the work or get drunk at 18 years sober.
Because you couldn't handle.
I couldn't handle it.
That thing inside, that thing deep inside that's been trying to find its way out forever is like gets overbearing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we don't discuss a lot, like a lot of it, like we, you know, a lot of us, like for this podcast, like we're trying to send a message to guys in our community saying like, hey, it's okay to have a problem, man. It's okay to ask for help. But I don't think there's a lot of emphasis put on if you are suffering from untreated alcoholism, if you're not treating your alcoholism and drug addiction with drugs and alcohol or some sort of spiritual solution or some sort of solution or doing the work, you are suffering from untreated alcoholism. Your whole life is still rooted in selfishness and deceit, dishonesty, betrayal, manipulation, all those character traits, which we call character defects. You're still acting on those because you have no solution.
They're still coming out.
You know, you're still lying to your friends and cheating on your girlfriend and, you know, not being there for your kids and, you know, not trying to help anyone, just being a selfish son of a bitch, you know. And that's where I was at 18 years. So the
band's going full blast.
The band's going full blast. At that point, I left the band.
How did that go down? You just had this crossroad choice to make.
It was the weirdest thing, man. We were playing
because I would imagine you're finally making money for the first time in your life.
We're making some money. I mean, we were just hired hands, you know. We're making cowboy wages in dancing. I hate to say it.
You just got to travel nicer.
We had to travel nice, and we had zero responsibility, and everything was taken care of. There was catering, there was after show food, and we had a rider, so all of our drinks and everything. So it was like, and who cared? Who cares? We were living the lifestyle, but
but you weren't getting rich.
We weren't getting rich, and nothing disparaging. I'm not trying to say anything disparaging about Glenn Danzig because I'll tell you what, Glenn Danzig. People like one of the first things people always say, they're like, "Oh, how's Glenn?" Because he's got a crazy reputation, mainly because people don't actually know him. Here's the one thing I will say about Glenn Danzig. There is nothing anybody could say or do to make me have a bad word to say about that man. Because when my brother committed suicide 2 weeks before we were going to go on tour, Glenn called me and said, call management, tell them what you need. I got it all covered. So if it wasn't for him, I would, and me and my cousin Joey Castillo, we were just talking about this. I live in Montana now, and his band was on tour. We went and had dinner, and we were talking about this in Montana a couple months ago. That he still has the receipt from the check that Glenn Danzig wrote for my brother's funeral. So if it wasn't for Glenn, I wouldn't have been able to bury my brother. So there's nothing like I have nothing but the most utmost respect and love for that guy.
So was it your choice to like, I got to figure this out, or
it was I'll never forget, me and the one guitar player Tommy weren't getting along at all. But also, I'm a drifter, and I knew it. And this had come to an end for me. And it was the weirdest thing because we were playing in Dallas, Texas. We had just played our third sold out night in Dallas. And I was playing on stage that last night, and I looked out at the crowd, and I had this feeling of like, this job sucks. Like, this is a job. There was no emotion. There was no feel. I was just going through the motions of putting on a show, and it was completely disingenuous and completely fake. And I was just like, it's time to go.
Just knew in your heart.
I just knew in my heart, and it's, I've never been one of those guys who is just like, I'm going to be a musician, or I'm going to be a cowboy, or I'm going to be an accountant. There's all these things in life I've always wanted to trying to find out who I am and where I belong, and that's led me to working fishing boats in Mexico and working scuba boats, taking people shark diving. And I worked as a conflict photographer covering conflict in the Middle East. I managed professional wrestlers and like this like a fucking like some weird carny just kind of jumping around, doing all this stuff, but basically just being a drifter.
But you knew that night when you walked off that stage.
I knew that night
that was it.
I walked off that stage. I was
and
like,
you went and told the guy like, I got to be done.
That was the last night of the tour, and we went home, and I called our manager and I said, hey, I'm not coming back. And I was like, there's no hard feelings or nothing. Like, my heart's just not in it, and there's a million people who would want that job, and there's a million people who would do a better job than I was doing, and as much as Glenn and I argued and we butted heads and stuff, we were always friends, and I hold him in the highest respect, and I wanted to do a good job for him, and I knew that I wasn't, because I just didn't care at that point.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm getting a check, and I'm probably going to get laid after the show, and that's it. But it was just like
meaningless, all of it.
It all meant nothing. It all meant nothing, and so I left, and I went like on this journey, and eventually, doing all this stuff, and eventually I found myself 18 years sober, suffering severely from untreated alcoholism. There was no
the pain didn't go away just because you got sober.
The pain did not go away.
That's the message. Like, that's the theme, right? That I think that I haven't talked about on here with anyone before. Because we all know the term dry drunks, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've said this on here before, but dude, I never put a gun to my mouth till I quit drinking.
Same.
Ever. Because I didn't have I wasn't dealing with anything. And then it was like the flood of like dealing with all of the unprocessed pain. Like, I wasn't anesthetizing it anymore. And that's when it's like, oh crap.
Yeah.
And you kind of like, because we always replace something when we quit something, right?
Yeah.
And you replace like the drugs and alcohol with something else. and still on the run, right, from it.
And which you replace.
Yeah, you
when
just keep,
when the sex stops
Yep.
working, you start gambling. When the gambling starts working, you stop eating, or you start eating, or you start doing this, or you start doing that. So we're always replacing it.
with
Never-
unhealthy things.
Never do we stop and we say, what is the root of this?
That's it.
What's the root of it?
Why do I do the things that I do?
Why do I do the things that I do? Because it all starts with us, which is a hard thing to look at. Because I have all these factors in my life that I could use as an excuse. My father OD'ing when I was young, abandoned me. My brother abandoned me when he committed suicide.
Mom was never there.
My mom was never there. She abandoned me when she gave me up for adoption when I was a teenager.
And so the narrative is like, I'm not really worthy of love, of...
So what's the point?
Yeah.
Like if my own mom,
The one that's supposed to.
the one that's supposed to, is going to give me away to another family, if my dad decided to check out, if my brother left me, it was never about like, man, my brother had so much pain,
Yeah.
so much shit that he dealt with, because he took a lot of beatings in the household for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if any of those boyfriends or uncles or anything tried to come after me, he'd be on them like a bull. You know, and he'd always take it, gladly take it. He would do anything to protect me. And when he was gone, when he took his life, I had nothing. And I had to go through a lot of work and a lot of writing and a lot of therapy about that, because when he died, it was all about me. Never did I take out the time to honor his death.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I buried him and I went on tour. We played a song for him that night. We dedicated a show to him that night, and
On to the next thing.
on to the next thing, man. And I never took the time to honor him or to, you know. And now my relationship with my brother, it's funny. Last night I was standing there. I was like, it was crowded. I was packed. It was just, you know, it's the Star Hotel. It's assholes to elbows and everybody's just, you know, whatever. And I was like, oh man, he would hate this. He would hate the cowboy scene. He would just walk in here and be like, you ain't no cowboy, you know, like, you know, so I think in terms of him like that, but I never did the work. So I was always, all roads led to me. All roads. It was always like everything was done to me.
Well, I mean, that's the victim mentality that the narrative that we really buy into. And it's, the tricky part about that is like, it's not wrong.
It's not. It's all valid.
That's why most people can't get out of it, right?
Yeah.
Of the victim kind of mentality, is because you have proof
Yeah.
of your life experience that actually happened
Yeah.
to validate why you feel that way.
Oh man, you have all the evidence.
Yeah.
You have everything right there. And you're like, this is why it's because of this. You know, but at some point you have to, even if you can just take the slightest bit of accountability and responsibility and say, hey brother, I need some help, man.
Well, it's empowering. It's the opposite of what we think it will be.
Yeah. Because the thing that we don't look at is we are surrounded by people who will help us, who will carry us when we can't carry ourselves, who will pick us up. Shit, you did it for me this summer when I was going through that breakup. I was crushed, man.
Yeah, you were.
I was crushed, you know. You're the one who helped me see that I need to be, now from where I sit, I'm so grateful to that woman who taught me so much about myself that I never would have learned. That now I have these lessons and I'm like, wow, man, I actually have some tools in a relationship to take in the next relationship with me.
Dude, that's like the opposite of victimhood.
Yeah.
This is just living proof of the journey,
Yeah.
right? Because something very painful and heartbreaking in the moment, and now you have gratitude for that whole situation, by the way, which wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Because instead of taking all the bondage, garbage, baggage into the next relationship, you're setting yourself up for more success, which is the whole empowering part of vulnerability and not being a victim.
The thing is, I never wanted to be in a relationship, ever. until that relationship ended, because I'm selfish with my time. And I don't want to have to consider someone else's feelings if I say, hey, I don't know, I'm gonna go work at the Diamond Cross for Grant. I can just pack up my
Yeah.
truck and go. My dog don't care.
Yeah.
She's gonna get in the truck and go. I don't want to have to say like, consider someone else's feelings. I'm like, what do you want to eat for dinner?
Well, it's hard to rewire our thought
Yeah.
process and thinking when you have to consider somebody else in the picture. But I want to kind of jump back to, you had 18 years of sobriety, you said?
I had 18 years of sobriety, and here's the thing. Also, another thing is, because I've heard so many people's stories, even just sitting in AA meetings or on podcasts or something, there's this defining moment that happened. I lost my job, or my girlfriend left me, or I got bucked off, and the boss fired me. Whatever happens, there's always some defining moment where it was like, I had to drink, or I just got to drink. I just said, screw it. My girlfriend left, my life's over, I'm going to drink, or whatever it is, these big moments that we have. I had none of those. What happened to me is I had 18 years sober. I was struggling I didn't know it at the time that I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. A friend of mine called me and he said, hey, we're going to go out and have wine with dinner. Do you want to go? And I said, sure. That was it.
Did you, knowing that like, oh yeah, I got 18 years, I can have a glass of wine and be fine? Or you didn't even think about it?
That's what I thought. I was like, and I gave myself all these, like, well, I was young when I got sober, and because I got sober at 20, and I didn't have when I got sober at 20, I didn't have I just got out of jail for possession of heroin charge, and I went to a meeting and somehow just ended up with 18 years sober. Like
that doesn't happen usually.
It doesn't. But it happened. In the beginning, I did some of the stuff, and I was really into it, but it just kind of happened. I didn't. There wasn't a lot of effort in it, but also none of my alcoholic behavior stopped, except for the substance.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that changed in my life. I was still lying.
Still angry.
I was still
bitter.
lying. I was still angry. I was still cheating. I was still stealing from my friends. I was still betraying everyone's trust. I was still doing all that stuff. But I just wasn't drinking. So none of that really changed. I was still, just kind of validating who I thought I was, I had this idea of who I was. So at 18 years, when that question was posed to me, I said, sure. Yeah, I'll go. And I told myself, like, well, I'm a man now. I don't even know what that meant. Like, like I don't know. I paid my cable bill on time or something.
For once in a row.
Yeah. For one time, I was like, man, I wasn't late on my electricity bill this month. I didn't let the bill go pink, or something. So I had, I was young. I'm a man, and I'm blah blah blah, and this and that. And I said, sure. And I know there's a lot of people that come on this show, and we all kind of have a bit of a different background on how we got sober, why we got sober, or what we do to stay sober. And this is just my story. I'm not saying it for anyone who's listening. I'm not saying this is the only way that works. This is just my experience and what worked for me as Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what worked for me. No, I'm not saying anyone else is doing it wrong or anyone else is doing it better. If you're listening to this and you're struggling, I don't give a shit what you try or what you do. Try something.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. You could go live on a kibbutz for all I care. Go sit on the top of a mountain in Tibet. If it's going to work, if it's going to help, it's going to get you started, go do it.
Do it.
So the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
So did you have the drink of wine?
Oh, yes.
And then another?
I'll tell the story, but I'll tell
okay,
because it's funny. But let me tell this. So I made the conscious decision to have a drink with these guys, to go out and have. We were going to some tapas bar, and we were going to have tapas and wine. Like I was like a some sort of aristocrat, like an art critic or something. And I called some friends of mine that I knew from AA. And here's two things that get said in AA a lot that kind of bug me. One is people say the definition of insanity is making the same mistake over and over again and expecting different results. That's not the definition of insanity. Someone said that. They tried to say that Albert Einstein said it. And Albert Einstein said, I did not say that because it's not true. The definition of insanity is the inability to see the truth. So I called some of my friends in AA and I said, hey, I've made this decision. I'm going to go out and have some drinks with dinner tonight. And I said, but don't worry, because if things get bad, I know where to go. Now, in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it defines an alcoholic by someone who has lost the ability to control their drinking. So we are powerless over alcohol. So, after identifying as an alcoholic, as defined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, me calling someone and saying, don't worry if it gets bad, I know where to go, implies that I have the power
control
to stop. And you know, as well as I do, once we have that drink, who knows where it's going to stop. And pardon my language, but I always tell people, like, active alcoholism and addiction is like getting fucked by a gorilla. You're done when the gorilla's done. You know, like that's how it is. So by saying that I had that choice was actually insane because it was not the truth. So at that time I was insane, suffering from untreated alcoholism. So I had no choice but to drink. And I went out and I drank that night. And like I said, I got sober young. And I grew up real poor. You know, the last time I had wine, it had a screw top on it. It was probably, I don't know,
Boone's Farm or something nice.
Boone's Farm or Richard's Wild Irish Rose.
Mad Dog 2020.
Yeah, one of those, you know. So I go to dinner, and the first thing that happened, and this is the worst thing that could happen to someone like me, is the waitress challenged my ego. She came up and she said, can we take your order? And we ordered some tapas. Yeah, we'll have some pescadillos and some gazpacho and this and that. I'll take a bottle of wine. And she looks at me and she goes, what kind of wine would you like, sir? In front of all my friends. I was challenged. Like she challenged me to the death. I would have fought this woman to the death. If she was a mean-ass Spanish woman, she probably would have won, which would have been far more embarrassing. But I looked her dead in the eye, and I promise you, I went just like this. I looked at her, and I go, the best kind. And I put my hand, I did that thing. I don't know what that means, but I did that thing with the hand. And
very sophisticated.
Very sophisticated, very posh move. And she brought me wine, and I drank that wine, and the first thing that I learned is I do not like the taste of wine. That was my first experience. I drank the whole bottle just to be sure, and we went bar hopping, and we were all out hooting and hollering. Everyone's having the time of their life, and I drank alcoholically. I was doing tequila shots and drinking beers and doing all this and just kind of mixing all my booze and doing all that. And I remember walking down the street with some friends of mine, and everyone's having the time of their life, and I was sober as a judge. And the only thing I could think is this is going to end bad. 6 weeks later, I was in a coma for 5 days from a drug overdose.
What?
Yeah.
That fast?
That fast. And
heroin?
Heroin and coke, yeah. And to make a long story short, I got out of that coma, and my first thought was, I detoxed now, so I'm going to be good. I went back home, and I started using again. I was intravenously using cocaine. And I shot some coke, and my body locked up, and my jaw locked up, and I started convulsing, and I started trying to pray. And I couldn't remember any prayers. I couldn't think of them. I couldn't say the Serenity Prayer. I couldn't say the Lord's Prayer, the St. Francis Prayer, nothing. I couldn't say any prayers. The only word, and this is, I'll say this: I'm not a religious man. I'm a spiritual man. I kind of pick a little bit from everything, and I take what I think applies and what I like. I take from the Great Spirit and the Spirit of Turtle Island, and I take some stuff from some stuff from the Bible and some stuff from the Quran and some stuff from Buddha and some stuff, and also, I mean, there's also a part of me that's kind of hedging my bets because I don't know who's the right one, but also I know that there is something there. I just don't know what it is, and I don't know if anybody necessarily has a monopoly on it. But I will say this: the only words I could say was, God, please help me, and I will go back to meetings. And God is my witness. Everything stopped. And I called my cousin Joey, the same cousin from the drummer, and I said, "Hey, you don't get me on a plane somewhere tonight, I'll be dead in the morning." And they flew me out to my friend Phil Cavano, who's one of the guitar players from Monster Magnet. He lives in a little town called Shrewsbury, New Jersey, in Monmouth County, New Jersey. They flew me out to his house, and I detoxed. And I walked into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with him, and they were doing a reading, and they said, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path." And I knew I was so far off the path. But also, for the first time in my life, I had this sense of fear and dread that I wasn't going to make it, that I squandered my 18 years, that I'm never going to be able to get it back, and that I was just going to, like, that was going to be my life. Drugs and alcohol was going to be my life. And the way I was going to help people was I was going to be that cautionary tale. Don't be like Josh, you know? But at the same time, I got some hope. And this woman named Maria, who adopted me and took me in when I was a kid, and who I call mom. What all true cowboys and all true tough guys and all true gangsters do when they're in trouble, they call their mom. And I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm scared. And I don't know what to do. And I don't know what God's will is for me. And I'm scared I'm not going to make it." And she said, "Well, baby, I will tell you this. She said, "I don't know what God's will is for you, but I know that God's will for me is not to bury my favorite son." And for the first time in my life, I heard someone love me. For the first time in my life, I heard that someone cared. Like it all made sense. And I saw all these points in my life where people had loved me, starting with my Aunt Deanie, my dad's sister, who has never been anything but the sweetest, amazing, most beautiful woman to me ever. She's the closest thing I have to mom, probably the only family member I talk to in my family. And I saw how my brother loved me and how he protected me. And I saw how my cousin loved me and he bought me a plane ticket. And he flew me to Seattle to see my other cousin, whose husband is a doctor. And they said the only way we'll fly you out is if James can come up here and give you a medical and just see how you're doing. And I saw how my friend Phil loved me and picked me up at the airport and took me to his mom's house to detox. And it was at that moment, even after all those years, that I actually felt worthy of having a good life and having a shot at this. And I told myself right then and there, I said, no matter how scared I am, I'm not going to give up on this. I'm just not. And again, I got on my knees and I said, I don't know who is out there I don't know if anything is out there, but if you are, please hear me. I need your fucking help, and I need it right fucking now. Those were my exact words. And I've been sober ever since. And I've had a good life, and I've done a lot of work.
How long ago was that?
That was 17 years ago. And I finally found that I still have that spirit, that drifter spirit and gypsy spirit and moving around and doing stuff. And I've done a lot of things since then. I've been a conflict photographer. I've, covered the Egyptian Revolution. I've covered 2 wars in Gaza. I've covered a war in Syria. I've been to Rojava. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Afghanistan. I've been to all these places. And, I've worked on boats, and I've, been cowboying and doing all that. And, but I found that the thing that makes me happiest, and the thing that I'm actually the best at, the one thing that I could call my own, that I can be like, I'm good at this. Like, some guys are just like, I can rope. And some guys, like David Simmons, I feel like you could throw him anything and he can make you something beautiful.
Yeah.
And I resent him for it.
Me too.
I resent him for it. But you could just tell, like, he's like, his hands were kissed by angels. Yeah. That guy, like, looking at that bit he just made, like, I wanted to slap him in the face because I was resenting.
I wanted to before he made the bit.
I was.
He just has a face you want to slap.
Yeah, I was like, man, we could do a smash and grab right here at the Cowboy Museum at Elko. Grab his bit and run. But the thing that I'm good at, that I know what my true calling is, and I know it's my true calling because it fulfills me, it gives me a sense of purpose, is helping people.
Yeah, come on.
That's where that's where I'm set at, and that's where
a life of service.
Yeah, and that's where my life is going now, and that's why I'm still cowboying. I'm out in Montana. I'm on this ranch and cowboying. I'm helping my friends set up. I just got a phone call from this guy, and he's like, hey, they want me to consult on them starting this place, which I was telling you about, starting a sober living, and they're like, we got the money, you got the know-how, we want to do it the way you want to do it. And they called me today and they said, hey, I've been thinking about it, and I don't want you as a consultant. And I said, okay, hey man, I get it. I can stay in Montana. I'm fine where I'm at. And he says, I want you to be a partner.
Come on.
Like, I want skin in the game. Let's do this. And I agreed. And it's, and that's what I want to do. That's where I feel my sense of purpose. And it's funny how all these things that since I became open to a message, and since I became open to hearing help, even and it takes me a minute, because trust me, that first phone call with you when I went through that breakup is, I want to kill her, I hate her, I hate the world, and I'm mad, and why me, and blah blah blah, and crying and all of it, to like, man, thank you.
It's a process.
Thank you for that experience.
Yeah.
Like, for all of it, all, like, the list of stuff that is beneficial to me in my life, and what I learned about myself, and what I learned about what I want to bring to a relationship, and what I mostly learned about what I did wrong and what I can do better. It was worth the whole thing. It was worth the whole
Again,
thing.
It's back to like the opposite of being a victim. It empowered you. If you look at it that way, which most people don't, and I get why.
Yeah.
But I want to circle back a little bit real quick. The life of service, of giving back, I think about this a lot, like, because I, like you, this is my
life.
This is my purpose also, is, to try to give hope to the hopeless person or situation. And that's very broad. I understand that, but I feel like that's why. And I think what's powerful behind it is that if you've been as close to the line as you and I have, and you come back from it, it's like I say all the time, I'm like, how dare I not spend the rest of my life trying to give away that's been so freely given to me?
Well, and here's the thing that's funny.
Because it's like it comes from this out of this place of gratitude. Like when I really dissect like the kind of the AA language of a life of service, right? And it's so much more than that. It's like I just feel so grateful when I wake up and look at my wife every morning and have these kids and all that I feel like God's like brought back to life that once was dead in my life. Like I have so much gratitude for what almost wasn't of being on the line, that it's more than just a life of service. It's like I want to engage with this with all of my heart and soul out of like the beauty that we get to see the world through now, and to look back and see the versions of our younger selves like we've got to see all weekend and be like, please hang in there because it gets better.
And there's nothing more fulfilling seeing someone who called you in the darkest place in life.
That's it.
And you maybe touch their life just a little tiny bit, and you see them getting married and building a life and doing stuff. And there's nothing more fulfilling than that. And the crazy part is, whenever something bad happens to us, when we lose a job or a relationship ends, or, get bucked off and get hurt or get hit by a truck or whatever happens, dog bites us, and we're always, why did this happen to me? And as alcoholics, anything is like end of the world scenario, doomsday
you
scenario.
cannot regulate any emotion.
So we're always asking ourselves, why? Why did I have to grow up without a dad? Why did my mom have to be this? Why? Like, the why matters. The why never matters. But we never ask ourselves, why did I get this chance at life? Why did I get this second chance?
Or fifth or sixth.
Or 100th and 5th.
Yeah.
Why did I get this? And these guys didn't. I mean, I got a laundry list of people I can tell you who have not made it.
Which is kind of the fuel to this fire of what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah. And it's like, whoever it is, and whatever grace was bestowed upon me, or blessing was bestowed upon me, to have this sense of freedom from drugs and alcohol and to be able to grow and have this family, like, obviously I'm here to do something with it, so we share it. Kind of like it's the same process as, it's really no different from a blacksmith who's gifted with the, I was going to say Davidson.
I'm so sick of him. Let's talk about somebody else.
His head gets so.
I mean,
did you ever notice whenever you say his name, you can physically see his head get
his
bigger?
hat gets smaller.
He couldn't even take his hat off last night.
I know, stuck on there.
But it's the same thing as passing on that knowledge. Because if you're quiet about it, and I'm quiet about it, and if this guy's quiet about it, and she's quiet about it, and she's quiet about it, and this quiet, and everyone's quiet about it, and we all keep it to ourselves, it dies, and no one gets it.
Yeah.
And then that's it. So it's kind of our duty as people who've gotten this gift of sobriety, because it truly is a gift.
Oh yeah, because not everyone,
to share it.
Not everyone makes it.
Not everyone gets it. The lucky ones die. The lucky ones die. The unlucky ones live that Groundhog Day life over and over and over.
Terrifying.
And over. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
People always say, "Oh man, my worst day sober is better than my best day drinking." For me, that is not true. I had some good old times.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I got drunk as a skunk with Dickie Betts one night, and it was the funnest time of my life. And he had the best cocaine I've ever done in my life. But we had a great time. And going through the pain of my brother committing suicide while I was sober, that was not better than mine. But I will say this, my worst day sober is better than my last day of drinking.
There, that's it. I liked how you framed that, because sometimes some of that stuff doesn't really fit to ring true for everyone.
No,
And how you just said that was good.
Yeah, my last day. So,
Well, dude, like I know this. I don't know a lot, but my life is better with you in it.
100%.
And here's the cool thing about, remember when you're contemplating sobriety for the first time and you talk yourself out of it very quickly, because that's about a 30-second thought, and you're like, I will never have fun again. I will never be able to talk to a girl again. My friends will hate me. I will be in isolation. You know, that 30-second contemplation of like,
Yeah.
that's a snapshot of what my life will look like if I try sobriety. Dude, if nothing else out of this conversation is to give hope in that it does get harder before it gets better, but the beauty of this life cannot be seen through a haze.
Yes.
And you don't get real brotherhood like you and I have and get to lock arms for something bigger than yourself, because you and I can't fix anybody.
No.
Right? It gets better. It gets more, life does get better, and it gets more beautiful, and you get to experience things that you never did when it's hazy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's always easy. It's not a fairy tale. It gets harder until you get the tools to figure out how to regulate your emotions with a clear head, right?
Yeah, but nothing easy is ever worth it anyway.
Nothing. That's what my dad always said.
You know. And it's and the good news is I think the big news that this podcast brings is that, you know, not only do you not have to do it alone, but you can't do it alone.
That it is.
This might be a bit of a shameless plug too, but we just named the thing we're doing in Bend, Oregon. And he said, think of a name. And I go, I want to call it the Bend Recovery Collective.
I like that.
Because a collective is something that you do as a group. Because that's how we do this. We have to do it as a band of brothers. You know, we have to do it together. We cannot do it alone.
Well, we tried and it didn't work.
We tried. It just doesn't work. And we're here. And I know you. People call you from your website, cold calling you from your website, you know. And it's sometimes just a warm voice on the other end of the phone, man, is like, it's enough. Like whoever's listening to this, you do not have to do it alone. Like there's plenty. I'll help you, man. I'll go from hell to breakfast to help you. You know, you will too. And it's like I'm more. You know, we're not going to do it for you, but we'll do it with you.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a good way to put it. Well,
yeah.
Dude, thank you so much.
I love you, brother.
I love you.
It's been an honor, man. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
We got about 15 minutes before we got to regroup and head over into the next room and do the panel. And
all right.
It's an honor to get to fight arm in arm with you in this battle of trying to help anybody that needs it. And again, this is the message of hope from a couple of freaking knuckle draggers who almost didn't make it out alive, and here we are getting to tell stories of hope and redemption, and it's possible. And I like how you said it's not easy, but you don't have to do it alone.
You don't have to do it alone.
So all right, guys, thanks for
having me, brother.
Yeah, thanks a bunch. Love you, man. Thanks, guys. Adios for now.